Yo, are you tired of being told what to do, where to go, and how to think?
Yes, but who are you? I know everybody just had a hopefully wonderful Christmas. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and quickly shout out a fundraiser that I've shouted out before, but it's still not fully funded, so I'm going to shout it out again. So for those who don't know, my friend Fleur, also known as Walker, their house recently was burned to the ground. We still do not know all the information on why or how, but we do know that having an entire house go up in smoke is not easy for anybody to handle. If you've got the ability to donate, there will be a link in the description below. That said, thank you very much for those of you who have gotten us 22% of the way there so far. And with that cheery subject out of the way, let's talk about voluntarism. Now, for those who are unaware of what voluntarism is, it's a philosophy that tries to argue that no human should be forced to engage with another human. No human should be forced to engage in any way with another human. And it uses a principle called the voluntary state. And the voluntary state is, well, basically the idea that you should not be coerced into taxing. Like that's what it really is. It's if you've ever seen like the 10 billion different variations of the taxes are theft crowd, this is their philosophy, or at least this is a branch of their philosophy. It is a outcropping from Anarcho Capitalism, which is this idea that like you don't really need a state so much as you just need a bunch of markets controlling everything. But the guy who actually coined the term voluntarism, Aaron Herbert, he rejected that because he still thought that a state would be needed to do things like law enforcement. Now, as with all political labels and all political philosophies, there's a lot of minutia here, and there's always going to be somebody that says that you got this wrong because of X, Y, or Z. Like that video where I described Marxist-Leninist philosophy, and then somebody said, that's not Marxist-Leninism, that's Marxist-Leninism. And I'm sorry, but up the shut fuck. Ultimately, these are all things that we use to describe other things. These are words and terms that are often used in a very, very loose way, usually just so that we can quickly describe what we are. Like when I describe myself as a socialist, I just mean I think the worker should own the means of production. You could fight me on the minutia of what that is or what that means for like 20 years, and I just quite frankly wouldn't care because I would have gone off to play a game of Magic the Gathering or something that I find infinitely more enjoyable than arguing that minutia with you. That said, if there's one thing that I will say at least about my channel, I will always be honest about my political philosophy, and I will also try to be fair to any other political philosophies that I happen to be dealing with. If you think that those are things that you want to support yourself, then maybe consider subscribing to my channel and telling a few friends what I'm doing over here. I try to make politics a little less miserable to engage with, and hopefully you think that's worth a like and maybe even a follow. So why am I talking about voluntarism specifically when I usually talk about specific individuals and their philosophies instead of a broad philosophy? Well, that's because there is a specific individual that I want to talk about today, and they go, at least on Facebook, by the moniker of the Pholosopher. You get it? Because she's a philosopher, but she's Vietnamese, so she's the Philosopher. It's actually a very clever pun, all things considered. But it's also kind of weird because, well, voluntarism is a type of libertarianism. Libertarianism being a political philosophy that tries to remove as many restrictions from society as can possibly be done. And there is a meme, and it's not even a meme, like this has just been an on-running joke in that grouping for decades about libertarian guys with their Asian wives, because libertarian guys tend to like these wives, and it just so happens that a lot of East cultures stereotypically happen to have a lot of women that are really into that sort of thing. And oh, wouldn't you know it, the Pholosopher is actually quoted multiple times in this exact group. It's almost like these pages are ran by the same people or something. Weird, right? But the memes keep flowing from places like this. I've got 99 problems, but finding an attractive, loving, intelligent Asian woman with whom I have frequent fulfilling sex is not one. Like, I'm sorry, but Those are the things you say when you're really lonely. Like, I also am dating an attractive Asian woman, but really don't feel the need to flaunt about it. I can just walk outside and touch grass, and I'm fulfilled way more than that. But focusing on the Philosopher more here, there's some weird stuff in here, but it's all kind of what you would expect from this type of content creation. Taxation is extortion. Which, like, can I just say right now, I'm willing to be on board with the idea that taxation is theft, but I'm also on the idea myself that not all theft is immoral. I do not see theft as a moral or immoral action, because if a family is starving and they need to eat, then the theft, moral or not, is the more moral action they could take, aside from, like, letting their family fucking starve. Like, I'm sorry, but I think that theft, like with any other human action, needs to have context in order to determine whether or not it's moral or immoral. But we have this idea, this simplification of the mind, where we just see certain things as automatically wrong without looking at any broader context. It's a pretty bad human trait that we all share. But what I mostly want to focus on throughout all of this is these weird AI-generated comics that are everywhere here, just mining for people to respond to them. And they're all some variation of either like the 4-panel basic internet comic, or they're one of these, which is some leftist person holds up a sign with a quirky phrase that leftists say during rallies and shit like that, and then the Pholosopher comes in wearing traditional Asian garb and explains to them why they're wrong. And whenever she does, every single one of these is the exact same thing. It's either the person getting angry about it or the person having this like shocked face about it always. And the inconsistent artwork amongst all of these, I'm trying to flip through the ones that are not just selfies, but the inconsistent artwork for all of these, the inconsistent ways that her character is portrayed, all just reek of AI generation, which means, yeah, I'm glad that you did literally the lowest amount of effort possible in getting all of this shit made for you. It's all slop, but let's go ahead and dissect some of that slop, because you obviously thought that that slop was worth utilizing, but you seem to also be using AI generation a lot. I'm assuming that you're also using it to make your point, so I expect to see some of that possibly. But looking at the very first comic here, the one that I brought up initially, we've got, why is there a tobacco tax? So that people smoke less. And why is there an income tax? I don't know if that guy's a pickle or a green condom. I'm uncertain. But a very common thing with a lot of these comics is they will obfuscate information in order to try to, showcase some kind of point. So, yes, one of the reasons that we have a tobacco tax is to discourage smoking by making smoking more expensive for people. And yeah, it's actually done a decent job at that. I know this isn't a study, this is just a thing from tobaccofreekids.org, but the information is still pertinent, and you can go fact check it yourself if you'd like. But by having a tobacco tax, we've actually lowered the amount of people that are smoking by about 7% since implementing the tax. Now, there's correlation, causation conversations that can be had there about what actually led to that percent overall, but it's definitely been a help there. But one of the other reasons that you have that tax is to help fund state government. After all, a tax isn't just there to punish you, and to think that is naive. Those tax dollars go to things like funding healthcare subsidizations. Those taxes go to people's Social Security. Those taxes go to funding schools and police departments. And they also go towards funding roads, which if you didn't have functional roads, then your cars would just get fucked up and you'd have increased repair bills, if you could even drive from place to place. Those taxes go towards our defense spending, which allow us to have a safer, more secure nation. Again, there is nuance here. There's a conversation that can be had about how much money should be spent on defense in the richest country in the fucking planet, and how much money should be spent on healthcare from the richest country on the fucking planet, but the idea is still the same either way. those dollars do not disappear. They are to be used for those purchases. And again, there's probably somebody who wants to come in and say, well, don't politicians misuse those funds and misappropriate them? And yeah, human error happens. But if you look for a perfect system every time, you will let that get in the way of any good systems that could come up from that. And you'd even let that get in the way of bad systems that produce good results irrespective of their flaws. But for the first actual comic, we have the fight for $20. Your life isn't made worse by somebody making $20 an hour at McDonald's. A rising tide raises all ships, which is not exactly the most articulate way to argue for the $20 minimum wage, but okay, sure, why not? We're more focused on what Pholosopher says here. So she comes in and says, raising the minimum wage does not raise productivity. If someone cannot provide more value for that wage, they won't be hired. A rising minimum wage simply raises unemployment. And I think a commonality you'll find with a lot of these responses is they make sense on the surface. If you think of a business that is struggling to pay its employees the bare minimum right now, then they're going to struggle even harder to pay the $20 that employees are asking for. But if we actually check into the data on this, a plurality of studies found a minimally negative employment effect, sometimes indistinguishable from random noise, from raising the minimum wage. In full transparency, there were also 8 studies that just showed completely mixed or inconclusive results. But since most studies found a minimally negative employment effect and no actual major effect, this suggests that minimum wage increases do not threaten to actually raise unemployment. But on the surface, you may think, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. If a business can't pay its employees enough, then they're not going to pay them anymore when they don't have that money to begin with. And you might think about how much that labor is worth, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you a simple truism that anybody on the left would agree with. All labor is worth a living wage. If you are providing a service to a corporation or a business, then you deserve to be making a living wage from that work if you are full-time employed. If you're part-time employed, there's, again, nuance in this conversation where we talk about how businesses have used the part-time employment loophole to force people to take on 2 or 3 jobs, all at about 10 to 20 hours a week, instead of actually having any full-time employment. But if the data is showing that raising the minimum wage does not actually lead to the second order or domino effect of people just simply having higher unemployment rates, then what's the actual point? Do we just accept that Pholosopher is wrong here? Well, yeah, that's the first part. But then we have to ask the question of why is she asking this? Why is she responding this way? Well, most of it comes down to the fact that libertarians, despite maybe not always calling themselves Anarcho Capitalists and Voluntarists, maybe not always calling themselves libertarians, but certainly all being in that same political bent, many of them are what I'd like to call servants of capital. They are people who will argue in favor of big business every time. They are not allied with you, the worker. They are allied with people who make shit tons of fucking money, either because of one of a couple of situations. Situation 1, they might think that one day they will become those people with that amount of money. And so they aspire to run defense for these people because they're the alpha males of the market. They're the people who you should be advocating for in all scenarios because you want to be like them, right? But this comes from the misguided thought that all of us are just temporarily disgraced billionaires. All we have to do is hit the lottery numbers right one day, or come up with the right business model, or hit that lucky break, and suddenly we too will be billionaires. But statistically, that doesn't fucking happen. The other scenario, the far more sleazy one, is that many of these people are, well, already fucking rich. Now, in the case of the Pholosopher, I don't actually believe that they are rich because, well, they're using AI generation for damn near everything, which reeks of, well, not having the funding to pay an actual fucking artist. Honestly, kind of sad. Hope you have the liberty to find better talent sometime in the future. And their channel doesn't really seem to get that many views. I mean, these are numbers that are even lower than mine, and my channel's fairly small. It looks like the time that she actually had any measure of popularity was back during COVID, where she made an official music video about not liking masks.
Yo, are you tired of being told what to do, where to go, and how to think by a bunch of sick psychopaths? I know I am. Fuck the mask order and the New World Order. Fuck the mask order and the New World Order.
Oh, we're in full-on conspiracy bullshit. That's where this was, because the only people who really mentioned the New World Order at least 6 years ago, and I mean, especially 10 years ago and even now, are people who are very, very far down the Alex Jones-styled conspiracy pill nuthole. And they're definitely not actually going to be doing anything with these music videos. I'm sorry.
I am the anti-state. Through my resistance, I am safe. I am the anti-state.
Riveting stuff. It's going to be on my Spotify playlist tomorrow. And I'm not making fun of the singing or anything like that. Like, honestly, I don't sing that well, and I took lessons, and I did not manage to do much with it, aside from get better at a skill that I could not develop into anything more than that. But it's the actual content of the message that is consistent across everything that the philosopher seems to do. And it's this idea that they do not want to be under the thumb of a state, so, you know, government bad, but you realize that the government is just a group of people that get money and are in power. And if we happen to live in the world of cyberpunk, where the government takes a back seat to every major corporation, and those corporations were dictating all of our rules anyway, like, this would be the same thing. Like, you'd be under the same amount of laws and scrutiny, they would just be by a group that you're okay with. Mostly because we wouldn't call those things laws anymore. They would be violations or some other weird buzzword about that. Like, the entire idea of voluntarism seems to be about, well, the idea that we should have a strong respect for individual liberty. We should be morally consistent with all of our standards for things, which is why there's so much, like, showing hypocrisy in the comics. And we'll get back to the comics here in a second. The idea that all things should be incentive-driven. If there's any services or anything like that, then they must satisfy users in order to survive, which, you know, just means that a clever marketing team could convince people that they are not satisfied with the state of affairs. Again, for every positive you can find for voluntarism, there is an easy counter that basically throws it under the rug. For instance, they believe that all power should be decentralized rather than centralized, and that's really cool and all, but what happens when you get a group that decides to centralize power anyway? So you lose the ability to have centralized power in a state, but you then gain the world where power is being centralized in the hands of a giant corporation instead. And that giant corporation starts doing dumb shit, like putting lead in your water, and now suddenly you can't do anything about that. You have no entity to fight back against that, either by yourself or, you know, on your behalf. You no longer have the ability to have publicly funded national defense. You must have privately funded national defense, which has never led to any problems ever. Trust me, there's never been a problem with private paramilitary being the just machismo wing of any corporation. That's never backfired on anyone ever. You lose the ability for public good, large infrastructure projects when you engage in voluntarism, because guess what? You no longer have a government handling any of that. You have private businesses who will no longer do things for the public good. They will only do things for personal enrichment. You lose the ability for laws to be standardized across a nation, and suddenly people can just find themselves thrown in random jail cells not knowing what rights they even fucking have, because all of that has been taken away from them. Like, the voluntarism feels like with all libertarianism, to me, it feels like the philosophy of a 12-year-old. It feels like the guy who really doesn't want to go to bed and really hates rules imposed on them by their parents, and then they grow up physically, but they never grow up mentally. And this isn't just aimed at the philosopher, this is aimed at pretty much anybody with this particular ideology.
This is my calling. I am not a slave.
Ah, yes, I see we're talking to the rose about how we're not a slave, something that is commonly used as a way to show what the Democratic Socialist Party is. And if you think I'm reaching on that one, I promise you I'm not, because in almost all of these weird AI-generated comics she makes arguing with fake leftists, they're almost all members of the DSA, it looks like. Like, they've always got the rose with the fists, with the black highlights and everything. It's always the Democratic Socialists, the people who just want you to have access to fucking healthcare when you're 65. Those are the bad guys in your story, by the way. Back to the comics for a minute, we get one of the very standard lefty takes of billionaires don't create jobs, which, I mean, technically they do. Like, this is a fairly incomplete thought on its own, but again, I'm not gonna try to throw it on the Pholosopher to actually understand leftist talking points, merely to strawman them. Billionaires don't create jobs, workers create billionaires. Okay, well, that part's actually true. Like, you don't get billionaires without workers under them, period. But then the Pholosopher comes into the shocked leftist who, I don't know if this was a nostril or a nose ring in the first version of the image, but, I mean, the inconsistent line work of the second version of the image definitely forgot it. Anyway, laughing at her use of AI aside, we have Pholosopher coming in saying, being a billionaire does not mean that someone is not a worker. Providing value to millions of people means that someone had the work ethic to build a business worthy of widespread value creation. And, okay, this doesn't actually refute the claim either. When you simply say that being a billionaire does not mean that someone is not a worker, it doesn't mean that they are a worker either, though. Like, you have a counterclaim now that you haven't actually engaged with. In fact, actually, the claim that was aimed at you was, I say aimed at you, but you wrote the claim on both sides. You had the ability to make this argument however you wanted, but you had billionaires don't create jobs, workers create billionaires, and then you argue against a completely different point that was not made, which is that being a billionaire does not mean that someone's not a worker. That's not the point that was even in the first fucking sign, ma'am. Let me get that providing value to millions of people means that someone had the work ethic to build a business worthy of widespread value creation. So, okay, again, this doesn't actually refute what's being said there, because a billionaire doesn't need to actually create value. A billionaire simply needs to artificially impose value, which means all they need is a marketing team to convince you that you need an item that they have. Ask yourself, do you need anything right now that AI generation has done? I'd argue that you really don't need anything that AI generation has created. You don't need what it does for information gathering because you already had the ability to do that by using search engines. You didn't need a giant farm that was killing everybody's access to potable water to make that happen. You didn't need AI generation to make your stupid fucking comics. You could have just learned how to draw or hired an artist. You had plenty of options in order to produce this, but you chose the one that requires the least amount of friction, which again makes sense because libertarians, generally speaking, are very, very lazy with how they build the foundations of their philosophy. It's literally, I don't like rules, no nuance detected. Then we get another one of these fun comics. I promise this is the last one I'm going to go over. But we have what seems to be an overweight democratic socialist saying that socialism means we, the people who do the work, reap the fruits of our labor. And, I mean, that's kind of what socialism tries to argue for in general. Like, it's literally the idea that if democracy works so well in governments, then maybe you should have it in the workflow. That's why she hates socialism so much. She doesn't like democracy. Because democracy is a thing we do in fucking governments. Trying to extend that democracy into a business is just taking all the things they hate about government and moving it into a fucking business. It's, again, just a flat-out disdain for rules. That's all it is. It is just a childish disdain for rules. Anyway, the way that she responds to the shocked overweight leftist is socialism means forced majority rule by workplace democracy. which is not how democracy works either, because you can have various forms of democracy that don't end up being forced majority rule. Like, we have a representative democracy in the United States because we are a republic. By having that, we have representatives that try to do what is best for the most amount of people possible. It's not the same thing as majority rule because the representatives are there to act as the filter. Now, is it a perfect system? No, but I've already talked earlier in the video about how if you try to always look for the perfect system, you will rob yourself of the ability to experience a good system. It isn't about reaping the fruits of your labor. Yes, the fuck it is. If I am going to work, my goal is a paycheck. I am there to reap the fruits of my labor. I do not give a shit what you think, ma'am. It's about taking away the fruits from those who provided the business capital and set the business vision. Okay? So the people who already had money and the people who had an idea, that's the people we're defending, as opposed to the people who actually put the blood, sweat, and tears and gained the expertise to make the business function. Okay, well, we're just fundamentally at odds. If you wanted more fruit, you'd start your own business with like-minded people. So this is one of the major problems with voluntarism. Not everybody is equipped to start their own business. Not everybody is the type of person who should even be leading their own business. So to tell them, you don't actually deserve a living wage if you're not willing to go out and start your own fucking farm when, you know, you're working at a Walmart. I'm sorry, no, that's just stupid. Again, it's childish and naive. It is the kind of thought process that somebody has as a kid when they think, well, why wouldn't I just go start my own thing with blackjack and hookers? Well, because there's a lot of red tape to get through. You need to have starting capital for one, and that's kind of a problem for most people. You need to have enough money to hire workers in the first place. And if you don't have that money, then you automatically only give that power to the people who have that money in the first place. And at that point, you're basically hoping and praying that the people who have money when you don't happen to be ethical enough to build a business that will work in your favor as opposed to against your favor. Like, yeah, in a perfect world, every single capitalist who has made every single business is the perfect example of an angel, and they are going to make a business that not only provides for the people a good that they need instead of marketing and addictive technology to them that they do not need and is fucking with their brains. Not only are they making an ethical product for people and sourcing everything for the product ethically, but they are also making sure that the people in their business are treated ethically. But since we don't live in that world, then we can't have the libertarian world. I would be perfectly willing to live in a libertarian world if I could guarantee that every single business owner was operating 100% altruistically all the time. But I know that they don't, and you know that they don't. So we can't have your world. We need a world which actually wrestles with the failures of the human condition, and I'm sorry, libertarianism is not and will never be that world. And when you dress it up as voluntarism, that does not make that world any more appealing. It's the same world. You get BioShock. Congratulations. But I haven't even gotten to the weirdest part about all this, and yeah, the anti-government rapping was not the weirdest part about this. I've seen that a billion times before. No, the weird part here is the Voluntarist comic ostensibly written by Pholosopher, though I don't know if it's written by her or if it's written by AI, I'm not exactly sure. But I just have to ask the question, is this just a power fantasy for people who do not like rules? Like, I wonder at first, but it just seems like it's that, really. Granted, I have not read this comic, and I do not perceive myself to ever want to read this comic. But I can show you a trailer for this comic that was definitely AI generated, and maybe this will give you a pretty good idea of what we're looking at.
All stations, this is DOC. Unauthorized individual reported Sector Delta. QRF, deploy 4 Humvees with Alpha Team to Grid A5. Detain male suspect.
So we have a military saying, do not come here, and the voluntarist killing Everyone. They're all, like, just murdering all of them. Why? I mean, it's not even really self-defense because they deliberately went into this area. Why are they here? Yeah, fuck if I know. Yeah, voluntarism. It's about killing government officials. Hip hip hooray. I don't know what the fuck I watched. What is the story there other than you do not like the government, so you made a superhero who kills people in the military? Like, that's what it is. That's what we have there. I'm not... This does not make me want to read your fucking comic. Not even in the slightest. That all said, that's about as much of this, well, slop as I can take. And that's what it is, really. It's all AI-generated nonsense made by what seems to be a couple that also run the Libertarian Guys with Asian Wives Facebook group, which is, again, a meme that has persisted for years. They had a lot of notoriety during COVID, and now they have lost that notoriety, so we have such shining videos like...
Is veganism compatible with libertarianism? Can veganism even be consistently held in a libertarian framework?
I'm just gonna go ahead and save you an entire fucking video and just say, yeah, you can be libertarian and be vegan. There's nothing about those two philosophies that cannot function within themselves, because being vegan is an individual choice, and you're allowed to just do that if you fucking want. There, 10-minute video over, and I just saved you a bunch of boring watching. So from a channel that seemed to gain a lot of traction during COVID to a channel that now looks like a worse version of mine, that's what we have to look forward to anytime I look at anything from the Pholosopher. And honestly, when I began this video, I just wanted to refute a bunch of the comics, because that seemed like a pretty easy thing to do. But, like, the more that I've looked at her content, insofar as I can call some of it that, because, like, I feel like content needs to be made by people. But as I look at so many of this, it just reeks. It really does just reek. And I'm not trying to say it reeks while looking at the Jewish stuff. That would be weird. That would be very, very weird. But all of it just reeks of not actually thinking through a position and just trying to convince people with a software that also just kind of steals all of its artwork and ideas from a bunch of other people in order to convince them that it's okay for wealthy capitalists to skim every single bit of money away from them. Like, telling a bunch of people that actually know, if you just got rid of the government, suddenly you wouldn't have to worry about how hard it is to afford groceries today, which just feels very naive. Just really fucking naive. But let me know what y'all think in the comments section below. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't see anything really worth digging into more than just the curiosity of everything on hand. So let me know what y'all think. If you haven't already, please consider donating to the fundraiser for Fleur. And as always, everybody, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Maybe check out the Patreon. And as always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Ritzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.